spent nearly 12 years working alongside hospice nurses. Not every day was filled with loss. Some were filled with long silences, warm tea, the kind of smiles that reach the eyes. But over time, you begin to notice things. Not just the medical charts or how often someone eats. You start to recognize the quiet changes, the ones no one talks about until it's too late. One nurse, Ellen, once told me something I'll never forget. She said, "The body doesn't shout when it begins to give up. It whispers. And if no one's listening, they'll think it just happened overnight." That became something I carried with me. Because the truth is, most signs that the body is struggling after 70 don't look dramatic. They're soft, slow, subtle, and unless someone close is paying attention, they slip right past you. The first sign I noticed again and again was an unusual kind of tiredness. Not the "I had a long day" kind. Not even the "I didn't sleep well last night" kind. It's deeper than that. I remember Walter, a retired librarian who had once traveled the world with his wife. He used to light up when telling stories of Istanbul, Prague, the old trains through France. But one day he didn't come to the community garden. The next, he skipped breakfast. When I checked in on him, he smiled, but softly said, "I'm just a little tired lately. That's all." But it wasn't all. Within weeks, he started forgetting small things. He stopped finishing his crossword puzzles, which he once completed with pride. He moved slower. He was still kind, still polite, but something in him had dimmed. That kind of persistent fatigue, especially when it's not caused by medication or poor sleep, is one of the body's softest ways of saying, "I'm using everything I have, just to keep going." Hospice nurses often spot this before the doctors do, because it's not about blood pressure or lab results. It's about the loss of spark. If someone you love begins to withdraw from things they used to enjoy, if their laugh doesn't come as quickly, or they always choose rest over the smallest outing, don't rush to fix them. Don't tell them to stay active. Instead, ask softly, "Do you feel more tired than usual these days?" Sit with whatever they say. Sometimes what they need is not energy but understanding. A place where their slowness isn't judged, but honored. Another subtle sign, often overlooked, is changes in temperature comfort. It's easy to laugh off when someone older always says, "It's cold in here," while everyone else is sweating. But for many in their 70s or beyond, this can be a signal of reduced circulation or slower metabolism. I remember a woman named Clara who used to knit scarves for everyone in the hospice wing. One day she asked for a third blanket. Not because she was dramatic, Clara was anything but. She simply said, "My bones feel colder this winter." Her vitals were normal, but over time we noticed her skin was pale more often. Her fingers, slightly blue at the tips. She needed help standing longer. Her body was speaking, and the first sentence it used was temperature. This isn't always a red flag, but when paired with other signs, less appetite, shorter walks, a faintness in voice, it can mean the body is slowly scaling back its non-essential systems, saving energy for what matters most. In these moments, I often suggest families prepare warmth emotionally, not just physically. Fleece blankets help, but so do slower conversations. So does allowing silence. And knowing that warmth is sometimes just being present without asking for more. These signs are not emergencies. They're invitations to notice, to ask, to sit closer. Because by the time the body starts whispering, it's already doing the hard work of letting go. There was a gentleman named Richard who used to play harmonica every Sunday at our hospice center. He wasn't loud about it. He didn't play for applause. He just let the notes drift through the hallways like warm tea steam. But one week he didn't show up. And the next, when I asked him about it, he smiled faintly and said, "I think I forgot how to breathe for music." His oxygen levels were fine. No chest pain, no cough. But what we later realized was that his breath had shortened. Not drastically, but subtly. He had started taking shallower breaths. Not because he was afraid or tense, but because his lungs quietly had begun to tire. Breathing changes, especially those that happen without obvious illness, are often misunderstood in older adults. They're not always dramatic. not wheezing or gasping. Sometimes it's just talking in shorter sentences and needing a pause to catch the breath, choosing to listen instead of speak more and more. It's easy to think, he's just tired today. But if you see this shift happening over weeks or months, it might be your loved one's way of adapting to a body that's slowly asking for gentler rhythms. We saw it in Eleanor too. She used to read aloud at the community circle. But one day, she started passing the book to someone else after just a page or two. When asked, she'd say, "I don't know why. I just feel winded so quickly now." No one panicked, but we began to slow things down for her. We made more space for pauses. And in doing so, we didn't just make it easier for her to breathe. We made it easier for her to feel seen. If you notice this in someone close to you, don't rush them. Don't push them to keep up. Instead, offer the gift of pacing. Sit beside them and say, "Take your time. I'm not in a hurry." Because most of the time, it's not about giving them energy. It's about giving them room. There's another sign, loss of interest in food, but not in the way most expect. People assume it shows up as skipped meals or sudden weight loss, but it's quieter than that. It might look like leaving the sides on the plate, taking 3 bites, then folding the napkin, saying, "I'm full," before even starting. With Mary, it started with toast. She loved morning toast with marmalade, never missed it. Then one morning, she just sipped tea. "Toast too hard today?" I asked. She smiled and said, "No, just don't crave it anymore." We offered alternatives, oatmeal, fruit, soft-boiled eggs. She'd accept politely, but eat very little. The doctors checked her appetite, ran blood work. All looked stable. But for those of us who knew her rhythm, we saw it. Mary's body was slowly letting go of the daily rituals it once loved. It wasn't refusal. It was release. This doesn't always mean something is wrong. Appetite naturally decreases with age. But when someone loses interest in favorite foods, especially ones tied to memory or emotion, it may point to a deeper shift happening inside. If you see this, don't push them to eat. Don't bribe, guilt, or cheerlead. Try asking, is it the food? Or is it the feeling? Sometimes, the hunger they've lost isn't for meals. It's for something they're quietly mourning. Sitting with them in that moment without fixing might be more nourishing than any food you could offer. If you're still here, feel free to leave your thoughts below. I read each one with care. Sometimes your words remind me why these stories matter. And if you've ever seen something like this, I'd be honored to know. One of the more misunderstood changes we often saw was a subtle shift in posture and movement. Not the dramatic kind that comes with a fall or injury, but something gentler, almost invisible if you're not looking. I remember a man named George. He was tall once, not just in height but in presence. Always walked with his hands behind his back, chin lifted like he was still carrying the dignity of his teaching days. Over time, I noticed something. He started to move differently, not slower, not clumsier, just smaller. His steps shortened. He stopped standing to greet visitors, preferring to wave from his chair. And when he did stand, his shoulders leaned slightly forward, his balance just a little off. One day, he said something quietly while adjusting his sweater. "Feels like gravity's stronger this year." That line stayed with me, because what he was feeling wasn't dramatic. He didn't collapse. He wasn't in pain. But his center of gravity was changing. His body, after decades of holding others up, students, family, life itself, was beginning to fold gently inward. This is a pattern I've seen many times. It's not weakness. It's the body adapting, minimizing strain, protecting itself by reducing motion. Hospice therapists would often work with patients like George in gentle ways, teaching small movements, subtle breathing with balance, ways to keep flexibility without fighting the decline. And when families asked, should we get him walking more? Push a little? The answer was usually the same. No. What he needs now isn't more strength. It's more permission to move at his own pace. If you see someone you love beginning to move differently, more carefully, with softer steps, or avoiding transitions like stairs or uneven ground, pause before calling it laziness or stiffness. It may be the body quietly saying, I'm still willing to move. just not like before. What helps most isn't correction, but companionship. Walk beside them, not ahead. Match their pace. Let stillness be part of the conversation. There's another sign I've seen so many times it still startles me when people overlook it. A softening of voice and expression. It's not about sadness. It's not depression. It's a kind of quieting that comes from within. Margaret was one of our most expressive residents. She used to debate books, laugh loudly, even wink when no one expected it. But in her final year, her voice became gentle, nearly a whisper. Her laugh was still there, but lighter. And when she spoke, she often paused mid-sentence, not because she forgot, but because she seemed to be listening to something inside her. "I feel like I don't have as many words left," she once said. "So I use them slowly." At first, her family worried. They thought she was fading. But we knew better. This wasn't loss. It was distillation. Her mind was still clear, her humor intact, but her presence had deepened. The hospice chaplain once called this soul quiet, and I believe that's exactly what it is. Many elders, especially after 70, begin to speak more slowly with longer pauses. They smile more with their eyes than their mouths. They answer with silence before speaking. And often they choose to listen more than add to the noise. If someone you care for begins to soften like this, don't assume they're shutting down. They might simply be turning inward, finding peace in stillness, savoring moments instead of rushing through them. What they need isn't to be pulled back into speed. They need people who can meet them where they are, in silence, in slowness, in reverence. Sometimes, sitting next to someone who says nothing is the loudest kind of love you can offer. Not every sign of the body's slow fading is physical. Some of the most telling ones are emotional, and even spiritual. There's one that many caregivers miss because it doesn't look like decline. In fact, it can almost seem like peace. It's what we quietly call the letting go. It might begin with simple things, giving away old letters, organizing books no one asked to borrow, clearing drawers that have been untouched for years. One woman, Ruth, asked for her wedding ring to be polished. Not to wear again, her hands were too fragile for that. But she wanted to leave it in a box on her nightstand with a note that said, "He can take this when I'm gone." She wasn't in pain. She wasn't even diagnosed with anything new. But something inside her had shifted. She began thanking people more. She began sleeping with the window slightly open. And when her son visited, she asked, "Can we just sit today? No errands. Just sit." These are not signs of depression. They are signs of completion. Hospice nurses have a quiet saying, when someone starts organizing what they won't need, it means they're starting to understand what they do. Letting go isn't giving up. It's a form of wisdom. At a certain point, the body stops fighting to hold on to everything. And the person, in their own time, begins choosing what matters most. For some, it's relationships. For others, it's memories. For many, it's peace. I once sat with an old jazz pianist named Elias. He hadn't played in over a year. One afternoon, he asked me to help him sit at the piano, not to play but just to touch the keys. He didn't press a single note. He placed his fingers there, closed his eyes, and whispered. That was enough. Sometimes the quietest sign that the body is preparing for rest is when a person no longer feels the need to add anything more. They stop reaching for the next thing. They stop chasing recovery, goals, even conversation. And what they ask for more than anything is presence. They may not say it out loud, but you'll hear it in what they choose. Fewer calls, slower days, softer rooms, less noise. It's not sadness, it's clarity. And if you can meet someone there without trying to lift them back into urgency, you'll witness something rare, a human being easing into the final pages of their life, with calm, not fear. When you notice this kind of letting go, don't try to fill the space. Honor it. Ask if there's anything they want to talk about. And if they say no, stay anyway. Your quiet presence might be the very thing that lets them know they don't have to hold on for anyone else, that they are allowed to rest. Not just their body, but their story. The body has its own language. It doesn't always speak in pain or panic. Sometimes it speaks in pauses, in softness, in silence. And as someone who has walked beside many people in their final seasons, I can tell you, the most important signs are rarely the loudest. They're not always found in test results, hospital monitors, or urgent symptoms. They're found in the way someone reaches less, how they sit longer, how their stories shift from what happened to what mattered. There was one man, Harold, who had been a mechanic all his life. Strong hands, no-nonsense voice, but in his last weeks he did something unexpected. He started humming. No tune in particular, just quiet humming, as if reminding himself he was still here. One day I asked him why. He smiled, leaned back in his chair and said, "Because when the body starts to go, the heart wants to leave behind something warm." That stayed with me, because we often think of the body failing as a tragedy. But sometimes it's a kind of return, a slowing down toward simplicity, where the person no longer tries to prove they're strong. They just are, in the way they've lived, in what they've loved, and in how they're remembered. So if you're seeing quiet changes in someone you love, fatigue, stillness, softer speech, shorter breaths, or even a gentle pulling back from the world, don't panic, and don't try to fix them. Try listening. Try asking less of them, and offering more of yourself, your patience, your time, your stillness. Because when the body begins to let go, what it needs most isn't medicine. It's meaning, and someone willing to sit with the silence without turning away. If this kind of quiet reflection feels helpful to you, you're welcome to come back anytime. I'll be here.